What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi Fruit Loop. What you know?
Snow and more snow.
Oh my gosh. Like,
We're
it's a
getting
lot.
more.
What?
We're getting more.
Yeah. So apparently, Thursday night into Friday morning, it's going to be just as much, if not maybe more than what we just got.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Have you guys had fun?
Oh yeah. We were out sledding again today. It was fun. It's we don't have a big hill, so
Oh, we
it's
do.
kind of a slow grade. No, you have a really big hill.
Yeah.
This is kind of a slower grade, which is fine for me. I'm old, so
Exactly. Which is
yeah.
why I have not been on my hill. I've had Grammy with me, and I've been keeping everybody updated on
Yeah, I
these little
saw her stuff.
shenanigans with her. I'm going to tell you that first night she was here, Fruit Loop, I woke up at 4 a.m. and I thought I had broke like a huge fever because I was wringing wet. Well, you know how cold we keep our house, like 64, 65 at night. Well, she got thin skin, so she says. So we bumped the heat up, and I'm going to tell you, I was outside blowing sideways snow in a t-shirt and a pair of shorts for 2 solid minutes cooling off.
No, remember her house is normally like 80 degrees.
You go in her house,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, in the
You just start
summer, and
sweating.
it's like a sauna.
Yeah.
So she's going home today. After we do this, I'm hopping in the Jeep and taking her home because she knows she's going to be back here Thursday night. So she was like, I guess I better go home for a few days.
She gotta go check on her cat.
Yeah, I know. We have had so much fun. And I tell you, if she moved in with me, I would be so happy.
Yeah,
Not even
she's
gonna
a
lie.
hoot.
But we watch all this dirty stuff, yo. Like 90 Day Fiance. Oh my gosh, Fruit Loop, I'm sitting there, my face is red. I mean, and Grammy's giving commentary, which makes it even more funny. Oh, it's been a fun few days. So we are going to give a shout out to one of our sponsors, Too Cool T-Shirt Quilts. You can go to toocooltshirtquilts.com/pretty lies and alibis and check out. You can get quilts, pillows. There's all kinds of stuff you can get. You can use more than just t-shirts. So check them out. www.toocooltshirtquilts.com/pretty lies and alibis.
And they can take your t-shirts and make them into a quilt that is too cool.
Yes, yes. So we're going to jump back into part 2 of this Moab report for Gabby Petito. But before we get started, we wanted to say that if you or somebody you love is in a violent relationship, whether it be verbal, physical, both, whatever, those situations don't get better. People like that don't change. If you need help getting started to getting you and perhaps your kids somewhere safe, you can call 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. Or you can text START, START, to 88788.
Yeah.
So we just, it's so common. And we just have a few stats before we get started to show how common this is. And, the sad thing is, as we saw with Gabby, when you're in a routine and a pattern of violence, oftentimes the victim will blame themselves. I had it coming. So 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men aged 18 and older in the U.S. have been the victim of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. That's a lot of people we know personally.
Yeah.
So, and then intimate partner violence alone affects more than 12 million people in the U.S. every year. 12 million people. And then almost half of all women and men in the U.S. have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetime. And psychological aggression is just as bad as physical. It just doesn't show the physical scars of it. So take care of yourself and your children, whoever you have with you, and get out. So we're going to pick up right where we left off. This was the formal complaints from attorney Tanya Reeves. And one additional concern that she wished to add to the complaint is the officer's lack of follow-up after Gabby Petito told him that Brian grabbed her face with his fingers, digging into the point of causing a cut on the inside of her cheek. It was hard to discern her exact words, although I did hear the word cut. But she seemed to indicate that her cheek was swelling up or tender, and she cupped it with her hand as she described the injury. The very first question the officer asked in response to this was if Brian had been drinking. He was very in his very next question, he returns to the swerve and the curb strike incident, which is what police noticed when they pulled him over. In the footage available to me, he never returns to Gabby's allegation of a crime to ask more questions, investigate, or follow up in any manner. And I think this is one of the biggest mistakes of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Because whether or not Gabby would have, she did say that he grabbed her, although she kind of made an excuse, as people who are abused often do, to justify that.
Well, you're going to see down later on in a little bit, we'll discuss it. The officers say that they agreed that both parties, an argument resulted in a physical altercation from both parties. So we know he was photographed. His injuries were photographed. He was offered a safe place to stay, et cetera, et cetera. And her question here is, Gabby wasn't photographed because there's no photographs.
Yeah.
It wasn't revisited, which it should have been.
Right. So the officer seemed distracted by the center line swerve and the curb strike and the admission that Gabby had punched Brian in the shoulder when the lights were activated on the cop car. And they spent the majority of the investigation pursuing this allegation, while the reason for the initial detention, the 2 911 calls reporting a man shoving and slapping a woman, which did not go far in this investigation on the road there, it fell by the wayside. Even when Gabby reports a battery that caused injury, her statement is entirely ignored because the officers seem to be operating under a confirmation bias that influence how they interpret the evidence and their theory of the case. Brian was thoroughly examined for evidence, including an examination underneath his clothing for injuries of which he may not have been aware. Photographic evidence was obtained, and he was offered EMS services for his injuries. None of this appears to have been provided to Gabby Petito, even after she reported a battery resulting in injury. And I think that is my biggest problem with this whole thing, right there in that paragraph.
Yeah.
So Ratcliffe states that the concerns in Tanya's above point are addressed throughout the investigation review. And Officer Pratt explained his decision. He said, I don't have special expert witnesses on the side of the road. I don't have 5 days of my trial with these people to figure out who to charge. I got like less than an hour apparently. So they trust me after 16 years to figure it out. And I took my 16 years of experience and said, I believed Gabby based on the totality of the circumstances and based on what she appears physically capable of and based on what I saw him doing and act the way he was acting, that I don't think she assaulted him.
I think those words, for me, that's big. I saw him doing and act the way he was acting, that I don't think she assaulted him. So there was something in there that showed who Brian was.
Right. Unfortunately, at the end of all this, he's in the front seat of a cop car having small talk as if they believed him. So Officer Pratt also added what he believed could happen if Gabby had been arrested and Brian bailed her out and signed the protective order waiver, which he did that next day. He went and signed that order so they could be back together. But Officer Pratt pointed out that Brian had said they didn't have a lot of money. And he said, so if he's going to bail her out, is he not going to have more control over her now? Now we're out of money. Blame it on her because I had to bail you out. You know, all it's going to do is put the power and dynamics more on him in his favor, where he's like, now we have to come back to court or video court. Now we don't have money because I had to bail you out. Oh, we're in another fight. Go ahead, call the cops. How did that go for you last time?
I think that's a big statement.
Yeah. I mean, but if you don't handle situations because of what could happen afterwards, you're still not helping the situation. All you're doing is, I mean, that doesn't help Gabby.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we all know hindsight's 20/20, and they'll say in their statements eventually that if they had known then what they know now, you know, things would have been different. But I think Brian showed his personality and who he was for them to make this statement that we were trying to save her, basically save her more trouble by not arresting her. Does that make, you know what I mean? Like something.
Yeah, no, it does. But at the same time, I think, well, if they were thinking that, then why didn't they investigate what she said more
Yeah.
about him grabbing her cheek and scratching her? So for
Yeah.
me, I just, yeah, hindsight's 2020. But I mean, the bottom line is they dropped the ball on this.
Yeah. So Ratcliffe goes through the Utah state codes. So he basically gives you the law, and then he'll say whether they followed the law or didn't. And we talked before coming on, like what he's doing here. I mean, he's investigating it, but he's telling you, okay, this is the law, and this is what they did, and did they follow the law or didn't they follow the law? And interpretation is big. And we see this in this case with them getting stuck on intent and injury, bodily injury, and all that. We see, I was a coach in high school for tons of years, and the way a referee interprets a rule drives you insane.
Yeah.
So this is, and officers have to interpret the ruling and the law. So what he did here was, so he gives you, for the findings as it relates to various policies and or laws, I will provide the following responses. It's either unfounded, which means investigation finds there was no violation. It's exonerated, which means investigation finds a violation did occur, but that it was justified, lawful, and or proper. Not sustained means the investigation finds there is insufficient evidence to sustain or exonerate a violation or the specific code or policy. Or sustained, which means the investigation finds sufficient evidence to establish that the code or policy was violated. So this is basically down to what the officers chose to do and not do. So the first one is powers and duties to arrest. So the primary duty of law enforcement officers responding to a domestic violence call is to protect the victim and enforce the law. And he ruled this sustained, which means investigation finds sufficient evidence to establish that the code or policy was violated. In addition to the arrest, powers described, and it's in section 77-7-2, when a peace officer responds to a domestic violence call and has probable cause to believe that an act of domestic violence has been committed, the peace officer shall arrest without a warrant or shall issue a citation to any person that the peace officer has probable cause to believe has committed an act of domestic violence. That one was sustained as well, which means the evidence, it was violated. So his explanation, he goes on and he says, this incident from the beginning was classified as an assault that took place between a male and a female. During the investigation, it was found they were cohabitants. It is my finding that an assault did take place, therefore should be classified as a domestic violence investigation. He says some other things, but in short, Brian and Gabby each acknowledged a verbal argument that escalated into a physical confrontation. Brian and Gabby each acknowledged getting physical with the other. It was also concluded Brian and Gabby were cohabitants due to their statements that they were engaged and living together. He goes on to say the end result of this investigated incident concluded with separating Brian and Gabby and not making an arrest, either by citation or custody. Based on the information provided in this specific incident, Brian would be the victim with Gabby being the suspect. And I know that's where we're like, no way. No way.
Yeah, no, because they didn't do a thorough investigation. They didn't follow up with Gabby. That's why I said in the first episode, take this report and throw it in the trash, because this isn't all the facts they acted on.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. He goes on to say, as it relates to the primary duty of law enforcement while responding to a domestic violence call, the officers protected the victim by separating Brian from Gabby. However, I do not find that they enforced the law. They responded to a confirmed domestic violence incident, and they had evidence showing an assault had taken place. The statements of all those involved, along with the evidence presented, provided probable cause for an arrest.
Yeah, so we're going to go into interview responses. The first one is Officer Pratt.
And this is, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
This is big because this shows you what the officer was thinking Like he goes through, he gets questioned, and then he gives an answer of what his thought was.
Okay, so this is Ratcliffe interviewing Officer Pratt. Ratcliffe asked how he reached the conclusion that this incident was more accurately categorized as a mental or emotional health break than a domestic assault. And Officer Pratt responds, he applied his numerous years in law enforcement as well as his overall life experience when stating he believed to see signs of mental health issues from both Brian and Gabby. Officer Pratt said, I saw the dynamics of their relationship. If those were all red flags that he was going to murder Gabby, I didn't see those. I saw the same red flags I see every time I get called to a relationship issue. And they don't call us there because they're doing great and want the police to come over and see how great they're doing. They called us because something is, it says devolved.
Yeah, I don't know what that wording is.
Yeah, and it could just be because we got C's in English, but either it's a typo or we just suck at English still. Officer Pratt described seeing this as another unhealthy relationship. And Officer Pratt said, if it was not an assault, which I decided it wasn't, then what else could it, then what could I call it? It wasn't an assault. If it was an assault, she would have had to have been arrested. But there's elements to the offense of assault, and you have to meet those. Ratcliffe asked Officer Pratt if he believed domestic violence assault took place during this incident. And Officer Pratt gave the example that one officer will handle a call different than another officer based on their training, their experience, and their interpretation of the totality of the circumstances presented to them. So Officer Pratt said, it's our duty to document and to support with reasoning, logic, and hopefully the law backing us because we all read the same code, why we choose to do the arrest or not do the arrest. And the better you are at that, usually the better cop you are. But everyone makes mistakes or reads something wrong.
It's the Andy Griffith movement. Like, Andy Griffith is my favorite show. And I don't know if y'all know the episode, but when Barney takes over as sheriff, like, Barney struggled because he didn't interpret and he couldn't think outside the box. So I don't know if you remember it, but the neighbors were arguing over a fence blocking the sun. And after Barney spent all day figuring it out, Andy comes in and is like, just put up chicken wire. The sun will come through chicken wire. And they were like, oh, we didn't think of that. Right. So, I mean, he's right. And we know officers, one, you interpret things, and to be an officer, you are called. That's your calling. It is definitely a calling. Like, I'm not called to be a cop. No, thank you. So I think he describes that well, I think.
Mm-hmm. So Officer Pratt stated he had determined that one of the elements for assault was missing. He explained this as being the attempt to use unlawful force or violence to cause bodily injury to Brian. When she was asked why she was slapping Brian, Gabby said, I just wanted him to stop telling me to calm down. Officer Pratt said that sounded very reasonable to him, and he didn't think she had the intent behind it to do bodily injury to him. I think she wanted to modify his behavior, and she doesn't have the tools in her toolbox to do it. I think the other thing that really bothers me, too, is just since they decided it was an assault, they just assume it's a mental health issue. Yeah, it's like that. I just don't feel like these officers read between the lines at all.
Yeah.
They seem so buddy-buddy with Brian.
Yeah, I think the time you spent with her, I don't think you could deem it being mental health.
Right. That's my point. And it's like, you know, they just jumped to that conclusion because they ruled out an assault. So she must be crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just, for me, when Brian was in the car with the officer, it was just like this dude talk. Oh yeah, my wife does the same thing. She got emotional issues. She takes medicine. It was just all as if it was all Gabby. And I you know, yeah, I mean,
yeah,
hindsight, all that, we've said it 50 times, but still, it's just, it's a shame that they can't send out people to every domestic violence call that are trained mental health professionals. And I know that that's not necessarily something that could happen because we would probably be shocked how many times a day one department is called out a total in one day for domestic violence stuff. But it's just because the thing is, you see it with Brian, people that are abusers are so good at fooling people.
Yeah.
And that's just what happened here. The first time I watched it, I just thought he was off. And then after she was murdered and we get all this footage, man, I've never wanted to punch my screen so much in my life because he's convincing these officers, hey, I'm just a chill dude. She's kind of off her rocker. And then they go with that.
Yeah. Well, I think some of this in this investigation points out, and that's their goal from here on out, is to place officers that have been trained in DV to assist and help them read. You got to be able to read people.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it's like the way Gabby was so upset the entire time they were pulled over. It's you just see that it's a little more than she's upset that they got pulled over because she was hitting his shoulder. It's like and maybe, I don't know, maybe because of what we do all day, every day, we kind of say, well, if I'd have been on the side of that road, I would have said, why is she so upset when we've told her she's not getting arrested?
Yeah.
What's deeper than that? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Officer Pratt also added what he believed could happen. And we went over this earlier. And for me, that's big because saying that he's going to hold it over her head and keep coming back to it, I think that's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a very big deal. We see Brian on that video and we don't see the whole picture, but you can glean a lot from what we saw. And obviously things happened prior to that. I had somebody ask me, why didn't she was in a cop car away from him? Why didn't she just say he's abusive? But it's not that easy.
It's really not. And that's the saddest part.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is. There's so many things that go into that, that it's not that easy. It's really not.
You know, like, you're not in an abusive relationship. I'm not in an abusive relationship. And for me, it's so easy to say, man, just run, go to your parents. They would have been there for you. But your brain is rewired when you're in an abusive relationship to where even I think in your private thoughts, you think you're crazy because that's what you've been convinced of by somebody who's toxic and who's manipulative and very successful at manipulating. And that's why we see so many death rates with intimate partner violence because, oh, I'll change, or, hey, it's all you made me crazy. And it's just so sad that these women believe it.
Yeah. Yep. And what I had a psych professor in college, one of the things and this stuck with me and still does, he said, somebody asked a question, why do women in domestic violence stay in the relationship? And he said, it's easy. That's an easy answer. He said it's because it's normal for them.
Right. Yeah.
They become accustomed to it. They learn how to function inside of it. And they choose to do that instead of being out with no money, no how, whatever. So they can choose to adapt, and they figure out how to adapt.
And I think too, with Gabby, one thing that was very telling to me on that police interview is where she's talking about doing this nomadic static, doing the video. He says, I can't do it. He says that whatever. And you can just see that mental breakdown that he would do for her, where he would tell her, you're not good enough. It's just, I would hate to think what happened, what we didn't see on camera, and then, what we didn't see on the news. These things don't come out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. So Ratcliffe asked Officer Pratt if at the time of this incident, if he believed he read the entire definition of assault to Officer Robbins. And Pratt states he believes he did, and also stated he looked up the definition of bodily injury to further expand on what the code was stating. He first had to see if the crime of assault was met, and if so, then they would be able to attach the domestic violence attribute to that. However, if there was no crime of assault, then it couldn't be a domestic violent assault. So Ratcliffe comes back and asks Officer Pratt if he still believes to this day, which this interview took place on November 1st, 2021, that attempt and intent were synonyms with each other. And Officer Pratt says, to this day, I still believe that. And then Pratt says, if he is wrong, he would adjust his future interactions in acknowledgement of that information. So Ratcliffe then explained to Pratt the 4 culpabilities and their levels. He also read Officer Pratt the assault code in full. And Officer Pratt says that does change things. So we talked about it ahead. They got sidetracked, and that's what you're getting ready to go over here.
Mm-hmm. So Officer Pratt said he probably got sidetracked with the bodily injury portion of the assault code and went and read the definition for bodily injury, neglecting to scroll down and read the rest of the assault statute. Officer Pratt said, and if I did, that's a mistake and it may have changed our decision, but I can't say that even here now until I read it and really think about it for a few minutes, because I do take the act of putting people in handcuffs and taking their freedom and giving them charges very seriously. And I usually spend a little bit of time reading up on it first and then try to figure out if that's going to fly. So yes, that second part you said, I would admit that could have changed what we decided to do, but I still would have to look over it and think about it.
Yeah.
So look, I'm not trying to be overly hard, like just bashing these guys. I know that they have very limited time and information to work with. I do understand that this probably will affect them for the rest of their lives. I'm not trying to be insensitive.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, when you're an officer, for the most part, and there's bad officers, but for the most part, you're there to help. And that's why you're an officer, is you want to help and help people. And when that happens and you look back on it, you know, when they did that, when they had that call, they never once thought that it would end the way it ended.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, I do. And that's why I wanted to say I'm not bashing these guys just for fun. But I also do feel when you're in that position, you've got, as a country, not just Moab Police, every department has got to really get serious about educating anybody who's going to be in the middle of these domestic calls to look for the nonverbal signs. And then also, some people can't look and say, I'm being manipulated by this guy right now. Yeah. I know that's a hard thing and it's easy for us to do now, but I just, and that's what Gabby's dad has made a mission, is not only to help find missing people, but also to help in the domestic violence situation we have in America right now. If her story saves one life, then it's worth it. Yeah. So maybe with this, Moab Police definitely are going to be changing some protocols. If that saves one man or woman or child down the road, then, okay, it's not all lost. But I just feel like for me, I just see this silent cry for help in that cop car and I can't get past it.
Yeah.
So
it's tough to sit there and watch her.
I can't rewatch it now. I just can't. It breaks my heart. But anyways, we probably still have at least one more episode on this?
1 or 2, because it just keeps breaking down this whole interview process. And he interviews these police officers several times. It's not just once. So we got a little bit left. I think tomorrow we'll do Robbins, break down his interview and his thoughts. But 2, we've learned there's several things. If you're in a domestic violence relationship, I know you have the pizza order deal. Have you heard that one?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So if you're in an abusive relationship and you're in a serious spot, you can call the pizza place, and the pizza company is trained, and they know this, that, you can secretly, and we'll research it more, so we give you the exact, but you can tell them a certain thing, and it just left my mind right now.
Oh, no, actually you can call 911 and act as if you're ordering a pizza.
That's right. That's it.
Give them your address. Things like that is.
Yeah. And what's the other one?
Universal hand signal. I think it's
that.
that.
Yeah. No, it's this.
But they close the fist too.
Yeah.
They close the fist.
So on the next one, let's cover some of those. So,
because here's the thing. There was something not too long ago, maybe a month or 2 ago in the news, where somebody was going down the road and somebody gave them that that hand signal, and they called police because they understood what that meant. And the woman was in a terrible situation, and they were able to rescue her. You know, it's, I mean, now I do at red lights. I look over and kind of smile at people, and I'm just, I mean, because man, it's just these poor people. I just can't imagine being with somebody who nonstop is hurting me physically or emotionally.
Yeah.
It's just,
it's like QT. QT has a safe area. If you feel threatened or you're in a threatened, you're being trafficked, whatever, they have a safe area that they lock you in a room until the cops get there to keep you safe.
yeah.
So just little things like that.
Yeah. I just, gosh, man, you know, it's like you want to just tell people, like, you're so worth it. Get out of this. Come on. You can do so much better. Oh, man.
Yeah. It's like what the other one, the stand thing that Gabby actually texted her mom.
Yeah. That's another one. And I mean, I didn't know about it until my 16-year-old said, oh, yeah, stand means send the authorities now. That's a code. She has codes. My daughter has codes with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we have codes. She has codes with you and that kind of thing. We just really have to, I think the base of it is to teach kids their worth, but also educate them on ways to get out of situations if they can. Yeah. With code words or hand signals or whatever. It's just a different time we live in. But this domestic violence is a tale as old as time. Unfortunately, it's just now we're so much more aware of it. Yeah. That there are so many little things. So that's a good idea. Maybe we do like half an episode on all the different signs and signals for being trafficked, domestic abuse, whatever. That's a really good idea, Fruit Loop.
Yeah. As long as you know, like, we're all about giving back and helping. So if that helps one person that's in a rest area or whatever, and you see that, then.
And I mean, I've been known to totally just, embarrass myself, but then I don't regret it, where somebody I knew I thought in an abusive relationship, and I flat out asked when we were alone, are you being abused? And they were not, but or they said they weren't. But it's like, I'm just not going to be shy about it anymore. If I think something's up, I'm going to say something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't care. I might lose friends, whatever, but
yeah.
All right. Well, we still have some stuff with Harmony Montgomery coming up this week. And then we have some updates on Alec Murdaugh. So busy week for us. And we will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.